Very pleased to be joined by Norris winner, three-time All-Star, and now studio analyst for ESPN. It's PK Subban. Hey, man, good timing for you. You know, you're on the Pat McAfee show. I'm watching you, and you're going like it's a bit of a gong show in Toronto. Correct. Welcome to actually Toronto, where it is a gong show.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, it's not. Welcome to Toronto. I mean, I grew up in Toronto. My family's still there, so I'm very familiar with it. I think that when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs, my disappointment is I think that there's just so much room for them to be better. So my frustration's probably the same as every other Leaf fan in Toronto.
Okay, so let's start with that, because I just went over it on my show. The Leafs, if you go year over year with their power play, it's clear and obvious. Like, they have struggled since the Montreal series. Like, the only time that they went over 20% is the one series that they actually won, which was against the Tampa Bay Lightning last season. When you're watching those guys right now and you're looking at the Leafs power play, what do you see wrong with it? And is there an adjustment that they can make?
Okay. Well, I think first of all, it's all about habits for me. And everybody is going to point fingers at the players, but the reality is this: you have enough talent in that locker room to make it work. Mm-hmm. And, it goes back to two things. Number one, it's the general manager and the players that you bring into that locker room to build out your team. That's one thing. The second thing is the coach putting those players in a position to be successful, not just in 82 games, but when it comes to the crunch time and the most important days of the season, which are now in the playoffs, you got to put together a group that's going to be able to get it done. And it's very, very difficult for me to see a power play. And call me old school if you want, but I'm only 2 years removed from the game. It's very, very difficult to have success on the power play in the postseason when you don't establish a shot from the top. Mm-hmm. Most teams now, they've been watching your power play all year. They know you're going to try to expose the seams. They know you got low plays. They know you got rotation. But until you have a shot from the top, those seams aren't going to open. So it makes it very difficult. Now, in Toronto's defense, I will say this: not having Willie Nylander on the ice is a huge loss. Mm-hmm. As much as they have a ton of talent there, Willie Nylander, what he brings, the element that he brings, allows them to get the power play set up. Like, if you notice, it's a struggle for them to get set up. Boston is a good penalty killing team, and they've always been great. They've been really good at the penalty kill over the years, going back to Patrice Bergeron, et cetera, et cetera. But Toronto can't get set up. A big part of that is Morgan Rielly's used to having Willie Nylander to help him get the power play set up. Mm-hmm. And as great as Morgan Rielly is, he's not an Erik Karlsson, right? He's not a true number one offensive power play defenseman, but he brings a lot of intangibles and a lot of elements to it, right? He's played with some great players. I thought he had a great game last night, but missing Willie is their power play has struggled. So, I think schematically, the pressure is definitely on Keefe now to make adjustments. You got to make adjustments to put these guys in a position to have more success.
Yeah, well, no, listen, man, you're not that far removed from the game. You also scored 50 goals in your career on the power play, and you got 200 points on the power play. You were that number one defenseman, and the thing is like, I know
in the playoffs, too.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. And I get what you're saying about the Nylander thing, and he's a dynamic player, and they should be getting him back for the next game. But, like, again, these problems have extended for them year over year. And so I wonder if you are looking at this when you're saying the adjustments, if it should be more than just him stepping into this power play lineup, that maybe they try to break it up into two, maybe they try to spread the talent around or add different guys to the mix. Like, is it just him to you? Like, you add him and then you try it again, or do you get a little bit more drastic?
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again that does not work. And I feel like if you go back, if you look at my Twitter account, and I'm not plugging myself here, these are just facts. It's there. In early October, I posted some stats, and I talk about Max Domi, and I said that the Leafs need to balance out their top six. They don't have enough sandpaper there. Yes, you put all these skilled guys together, of course, you're going to win a lot of games in the regular season. You're going to have a lot of success, and your power play is going to be great. It's going to look good. It's going to, everybody's going to talk about how amazing the plays that they can do, and that's great. They have the talent to do that. But when it gets into the playoffs, it's a different ball game. And, I told them that they need to get a guy like Max Domi up into that top six. Well, they do it later on in the season, and they've had tremendous success. But when it doesn't work, they don't stick to the plan. Like Max Domi should have gotten more opportunity last night. Keep him out there. He's played well. Live and die with having some sandpaper with those players because you're going to need it. You saw as the game went on yesterday, the experience of Brad Marchand and the Boston Bruins, Pasternak, it took over the game. You could see it in the third period. And I'm sorry, that goal, the game-breaking goal where everybody on the Leafs is on the wall, the puck comes off the wall, it's a 3-on-1 on poor Camp in front of the net, and Samsonov, he's got zero chance on that. Like, I want to understand this, and I said it in studio to Mess last night. I said, where the hell is the coaching here? And he goes, well, it's not always on the coach, it's got to be on the players. But I'm saying, no. It's the coach's job. You've got to get players to buy in. If you're not getting them to buy in and do – I don't want to hear you talk about Brad Marchand and what he's doing. We know Brad Marchand's a Hall of Famer. He's got 55 goals in the playoffs, the same as Cam Neely. He's a Hall of Famer. We know what he's bringing. I'm not going to sit here and talk about Sidney Crosby and the amazing things he's doing. Get your team to buy in to what they need to do to win. If you can't do that, you're not the right guy for the job. And I don't want to just harp on Sheldon Keefe, but it's a big thing that I see. There's too much talent in that locker room for them not to be able to get over the hump. And by the way, out of all the years that they've played Boston in the playoffs, this might be the weakest team that they played. They got great goaltending, but this is not a crazy defense they're going up against. Like there's no come on. This is the best opportunity that I've seen for the Leafs to take another step forward. And if they don't, there's got to be some huge changes there.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And again, Sheldon Keefe now 4-11 at home as the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs in the postseason. Like, I don't count the Columbus series because it wasn't the postseason, but yeah, 4-11 at home when you got last change. That's a really, really tough one. And, I'm glad that I have you on today, too, especially with the comments about Marchand after, because, you were a different kind of agitator than Marchand was. You're also a highly skilled guy. Famously in the Stanley Cup Finals, you going toe-to-toe with Sid trying to get in his kitchen. How happy would it have made you to hear the opposing coach name-check you like that after a game like that where you score the game-winning goal and he's starting to talk about, you and like referencing you specifically at the podium?
Well, I'll say two things. First of all, if you look at Brad Marchand's comments after the Leafs won Game 2, he was giving them praise. He was saying, "Oh yeah, they're it's a different team. They're tough." Listen to me. I know Brad Marchand. He's giving them praise. He knew exactly what they were going to come out and do in the first game. He wanted to come out and punch him right in the mouth, and that's exactly what they did. So, I think that for. Sorry, 1 second here. I should have put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I'm getting a call. I think that in Brad Marchand making those comments, I was watching this game extra close, and he knew he wanted to give them their praises, but he knows what's on the other side. He knows the culture of that team. You're not going to win 16 games in a row if you're going to win the Stanley Cup. There's going to be some ups and downs, but they're a confident group in their ability there. And when I look at the comments that Sheldon Keefe said about Brad Marchand, you're trying to take the attention away from your team. Your team had a hell of an opportunity last night. You steal home ice in Boston. You have a huge game. Austin Matthews plays the biggest game of his career, one of the best games that he's played probably in a Leaf jersey, maybe the best. Steps up, and this kid's done it like – enough with him. I don't want to hear anybody talking about his game. He's been absolutely phenomenal since he's put on that Leaf jersey. I got no question about his game. Last night, I'm seeing him get physical now. He's getting involved. Austin Matthews is a bona fide star. It's you got to get the team moving in the right direction. And for Sheldon Keefe to come out in the media and start talking about Brad Marchand is a deflection from what he should be talking about. And that's your team. Let them off the hook. You had an opportunity last night to go up 2-1 and really put the Boston Bruins in a tough situation. Yes, you ran into a hot goaltender. Swayman's playing well, but there's no excuse. Not when you're spending that much money on players, not when you're in Toronto, not when it's Original Six. It's not good enough.
Well, yeah, again, you're the perfect guy to talk to today because, played for Original Six from this city, you have family in this city. And I'm guessing that, you're talking to people who are from here and you've probably heard what they've had to say about Mitch Marner and how much of a media storm and fan storm has been coming his way. I'm curious, two things about him right now. One is, like, when we're talking about the other guys need to elevate, because, Matthews clearly has been their best player. What you need to see from Mitch in this series. And two, what it's like when you're in the eye of the storm. Because you're one of the few guys that can probably... You were beloved in Montreal, so it's very different from when you were there as a Canadian. But what it is like when that scrutiny is just incessant, nonstop, the way that it is right now for Mitch.
Okay, well, I'll first say this. I played for Peter Laviolette, who to me is probably, if you speak to any player that has ever played for him, he's probably the best motivator as a coach that you'll ever play for. That guy's got energy. I don't know where he finds the energy, but 82 games, he's got you ripping the door off the hinges, froth coming out of your mouth. You're ready to go every single game. And that's his nature, okay? As a coach, it's your job to get the most out of your players. Mm-hmm. When you see talented players like Mitch Marner that may not be playing your best, everybody always wants to look at the player and say, well, why isn't he playing better? Well, what the hell is the coach doing? How do you have a guy that's making 10, 11 million bucks not getting involved? Like, yeah, he's got to be a self-starter. He's got to get himself into the mix. But I'll tell you this. I'm going to go back to it. When Mitch Marner was playing for Mike Babcock, I saw Mitch Marner. There's a segment where he's blocking 5 shots in a playoff game with no stick, throwing his face in front of it. Where was that? Like, as a coach, you got to have players that want to go through a wall for you. And I just haven't seen that yet in Toronto. I just don't see it. Now, I'm not pointing the finger at the players, but what I'm saying is you got to build a culture there. And when it comes to Mitch Marner, you can say what you want about him, but you saw the play that he made on last night's goal. There's a handful of players in the league that can make those plays. He's an elite player. So you got to put him in that position. And I don't want to speculate. If a player is not playing his best, we don't know. Last year, I was very critical of Aaron Ekblad, in the Stanley Cup final. I'm like, where's Aaron Ekblad? Where's Aaron Ekblad? And then I find out after the season that he's got broken bones and a broken rib. Like, he's got all these injuries, right? So you got to be very careful on speculating during the playoffs. I'm not going to do that. But I will say this. Watching Mitch Marner make that play last night, is indicative of the type of player that he is and what element he brings to a hockey club. And you got to value that, because I'm telling you, you don't want to wait until he's playing somewhere else to say, oh, I wish we still had Mitch. This guy's been a stud since he's been in Toronto. I think his numbers are like 48 points in like 50, I think it's like 53 or 54 playoff games. So you can't lose sight of that. It's got to be from the leadership. Peter Laviolette has got all these weapons in New York, and look how he's managing them. Everybody's playing. I've watched that team super close all season, and he gets everybody involved. Everybody's got a role. Why isn't it the same in Toronto, right? If you excel too much in Toronto, it's a distraction. Like, I don't get it. So are you getting the most out of every player, or are you just doing what you got to do to win hockey games? Because if you're doing that, if you don't get the most out of all your players, if every player doesn't feel like they have a role, if every player doesn't want to go through a wall for you, these are the results that you're going to get in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Again, I think you were a guy that, and again, this is my read on you as an outsider, but you seem to like thrive when the attention was on you. Like, you never really seemed to have too much of a problem with it. People, criticized you a lot in your career, and you handled it very well with a player. Like, there's a reason why I think you're still in the limelight working for ESPN, right? Is like, you're like, I can handle this. Like, I'm good with it. But is it harder come this time of year? Like, when the pressure does get, like, from Mitch's standpoint of just trying to keep the noise out, what was it like for you in those moments where it's like, man, it's noisy around you, and it's the time of year where you're supposed to focus on you the most?
Listen, I think that from the moment that I was drafted, because of my personality, there was always going to be a spotlight on me. So I owned it. I just owned it. I think that some people probably look at me and say, oh, he actually puts the spotlight on himself. He wants it. He welcomes it. I don't see it that way. This is just who I am. This is the way that I am, and so I'm going to embrace whatever comes my way, being myself. And I think Mitch has got to be himself. Austin's got to be himself. Morgan's got to be himself. I don't think they need to be anything that they're not. I would never tell a player to be someone you're not. Not every player is going to skate 200 feet and throw themselves through the glass to try to hit somebody. That's not your game. But I'm going to tell you, in Toronto, including Mitch, they got a ton of talented players that are exceptional, that have Hall of Fame-like ceilings. Like, these guys can be Hall of Famers. So I'm not going to sit here and be critical of them as players, because I'm telling you, there's a handful of guys, if any, that have done what they've already accomplished in the league. So what's the issue? How come you can't get more out of them? So, I'm not so much looking at Mitch being like, what's wrong with Mitch? Why isn't he playing well? I'm saying, why isn't this an environment where he's excelling right now? He's young in his career. He's on a good team. He's playing with players that he's played with for a while. Why aren't we getting more out of him? And that's the question. Because as a coach, I would be sitting there saying to the media, it's my job. I got to get Mitch going. This guy's this is one of our pillars in our franchise. I got to get him going. We need Mitch, especially with Willie out. So, I think the way my biggest, I guess you could say, the reason why I have a burr in my saddle when it comes to Toronto is just the way that the team is managed, and especially in the media, it matters. I played in Montreal, where it's heavy hockey. Everything, the media is very, very important there. It can affect the locker room. It can affect inside the dressing room. It can affect players. It can affect their mood. It can affect their energy. And you need to have leadership behind the bench that knows how to manage all that. And sometimes certain players deal with pressure differently. Some players don't want that pressure on them. I had coaches that they love to expose me in the media, but I could handle that. So not everybody is built the same way, and it's on you. It's your job as a coach, not only to get the most out of them on the ice, but to understand your players and what makes them tick, so that, when it comes playoff time, they're not only ticking, they're talking too. And you need Mitch. The least you're going to need Mitch going, and a lot of that is on him, but a big part of it also is on Sheldon Keefe and the coaching staff to put him in a position to excel.
Hey, PK, I know how busy this time of year is and how many requests you get, so I really appreciate you making time today, man. And I know you got to run, so thanks for doing this.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, take care, man. PK Subban, studio analyst for ESPN, 3-time All-Star, and, of course, Norris winner.